The myth, she mocked. The stars outside the station were quiet, and the endless black of space stretched in every direction. The small listening post was built on the edge of an empty sector, far away from the busy trade routes and the noise of fleets. It was a lonely place, but for Officer Kaylin it was routine life. She had one job: watch the radar. Kaylin sat at her console, her long fingers tapping lazily on the controls. Her green eyes were half closed as she fought against boredom. The radar screen showed nothing, just the same silent dots of nearby asteroids and the faint signals of patrol ships. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. Another night wasted, she muttered. Humans, monsters, forgotten empires. All just myths to scare cadets. Her partner, a junior officer named Reelan, turned his head. "You still don't believe the stories?" he asked. His voice carried a little seriousness, but Kaylin only laughed. "Of course not," she said. "Humans vanished centuries ago, if they ever existed at all. They say they fought like demons, that they were strong enough to face whole. Fleets alone, it's ridiculous. If such creatures really lived, where are they now?" Reelan did not answer. His eyes were fixed on his own monitor, but Kaylin kept talking, enjoying the sound of her own mockery. "They tell stories about humans surviving impossible battles. About humans who could stare into the eyes of warlords and never blink. Some even say they tamed fire itself." She smirked. "Tell me, Reelan, do I look scared?" She spread her arms wide, mocking the dark legends she grew up hearing. Reelan shook his head but gave no smile. He had heard those stories from older veterans, men and women who swore they were true. But Kaylin refused to believe them. To her, humans were just a bedtime tale, like ghosts in the dark. Hours passed, and silence ruled the station again. Kaylin's console beeped from time to time, small meaningless alerts. Dust storms near an asteroid, a stray signal from a passing drone. Nothing important. She almost dozed off, her chin resting on her hand. Then, the radar let out a sharp sound, louder than before. Kaylin blinked, leaning forward. "Another false alarm," she said, pressing the reset key. But the screen didn't clear. A single dot pulsed in the far corner, faint but steady. Reelan leaned. "Closer, what is that?" Kaylin narrowed her eyes. Her console confirmed the signal. It wasn't a rock, it wasn't debris, it was moving. Slowly but surely. Her laughter faded, replaced with a frown. "Probably a lost freighter," she said quickly, trying to calm her own nerves. She adjusted the zoom and the signal sharpened. It was heading toward their sector. Reelan tapped his console nervously. "That doesn't look like a freighter. Its signature is strange." Kaylin rolled her eyes, but her hand trembled slightly. "Strange doesn't mean dangerous," she argued. "It could be a glitch. The system's old." But she kept staring at the pulsing dot. Minutes stretched into long silence. The signal grew stronger, closer, more stable. It moved with a precision that didn't match random debris or wandering civilian ships. Reelan whispered, almost afraid of his own words. "It matches something I saw in the archives. Centuries-old scans from the human wars." Kaylin snapped her head toward him, her voice sharp. "Don't start with that nonsense." But her chest felt tight. Her earlier laughter echoed back in her mind. Now, sounding foolish, she looked again at the screen. And for the first time in her career, she felt real unease. The radar beeped again, marking the object with a clearer outline. It was no longer just a dot, it had a shape, long, sharp, with an old design no one used anymore. Reelan's face went pale. "That's impossible," he whispered. Kaylin shook her head violently. "It's not possible. Humans are myths, do you understand? Myths." But her voice was louder than she meant, and her hands were clenched on the console. The radar kept humming, uncaring of her denial. The object was still approaching, slow and steady, like something ancient rising from the grave. The room felt colder. The hum of the station seemed heavier. Kaylin swallowed, forcing a laugh. "It's just an old wreck, drifting from some forgotten war. That's all." But deep inside, doubt was growing. For years she had laughed at the idea of humans, mocked the stories, dismissed them as fairy tales. Now, with the signal glowing on her screen, the joke didn't feel funny anymore. She stared at the radar, the pulse of the approaching ship beating like a drum, each second louder, each second closer. And in that moment, Kaylin realized something she never wanted to admit. Sometimes, myths are born from truth. The impossible signal, the signal didn't vanish, it grew stronger, pulsing steadily on Kaylin's radar screen. The quiet hum of the station felt louder now, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Kaylin leaned closer to the console. Her fingers danced across the controls, running diagnostics, checking for malfunctions. Her heart wanted it to be an error, something she could laugh about later. But every test came back the same, real, steady, alive. Relin stood beside her, his face pale under the soft glow of the monitors. "It's holding a perfect course," he whispered. "Not drifting, not random. Someone, or something, is flying that ship." Kaylin forced a smirk, though her voice betrayed her unease. "Ships fly every day, Relin. That doesn't make them human." But when she looked back at the display, her throat tightened. The object's movement was too precise, too clean. Not like civilian traffic, not like the stumbling course of pirates or smugglers. This was deliberate. She tried to calm herself. It could be a hidden fleet ship, maybe an old design we don't know. Relin shook his head. "No fleet ship runs without a transponder." He pointed at the screen. "This one isn't broadcasting anything." That truth hung in the air like a shadow. All ships by law had to send out signals for identification, even the smallest cargo drones. But this vessel was silent, moving. Through the void like a ghost, Kaylin's hands trembled, but she quickly tightened her grip on the console. "Fine," she said. "Silent ship, unidentified. We'll just report it and let command deal with it." She tapped out the transmission code, sending the data to Central Command. The message blinked once, then twice, and froze. Her eyes widened. No response. Relin leaned over her shoulder, his voice tight. "Try again." She did, faster this time, repeating the signal over and over. But the console only buzzed with error tones, the station's long-range transmitter was working, but the data refused to leave. Something was jamming them. Kaylin's mouth went dry. "That's impossible. No one jams deep space stations. There's nothing out here to hide from." Relin whispered the words she hated to hear. "Unless they don't want us to warn anyone." The signal on the screen grew sharper, now large enough for the computer to generate a basic outline. It was long, with strange wings on its sides, the kind used centuries ago before modern warships streamlined their shapes. Kaylin froze. Her memory snapped back to the stories, the drawings in old archives, the myths. She mocked. "It looks," she whispered, "like them." Relin's voice cracked. "Like a human ship." The words stabbed through the silence. Kaylin wanted to laugh, to push it away, but no laughter came. Her stomach twisted, her body refusing the comfort of denial. The station lights flickered. The hum of power stuttered. For a second, everything went dark before returning. Relin's hands flew across his console. "They're scanning us," he said, his voice thin. Kaylin's heart pounded. "How do you know?" "Because our systems just reset themselves," Relin replied. "They touched us. Whoever's on that ship, they're reaching into our computers like opening a door." Kaylin stared at the screen. The signal grew brighter, closer, every second. Bringing the ship nearer, her voice dropped to a whisper. "What do they want?" Relin didn't answer. His hands gripped the console edge, knuckles white. The crew from the other chambers started to arrive, drawn by the alarms. Murmurs spread, fear growing like a storm. They all looked at the screen, eyes wide. Some gasped, some cursed, but none laughed. Kaylin stood up, forcing her voice steady. "We don't know what it is until we see proof. No one says the word human. Understood?" The others nodded nervously, though their eyes betrayed their thoughts. The myths had lived for centuries, told in whispers around campfires. The return of humans meant only one thing: war. The console beeped again, pulling Kaylin's eyes back to the screen. The system gave a clearer model now. The ship was massive, older than any design in the fleets. Its hull shape matched ancient records. Her chest grew tight. Her earlier jokes about myths felt like sharp knives now. The stories had said humans, vanished, destroyed in their own wars, or simply gone into the dark. But what if the stories were wrong? What if they had only been hiding? Relin turned to her. "What do we do?" Kaylin opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time in her career, she had no orders, no plan. Only the thundering of her own heartbeat and the glow of the impossible ship approaching their sector. The station vibrated softly, not from impact but from resonance. The ship was close enough now that its engines rattled the sensors. The sound was faint, almost like a heartbeat echoing through metal walls. Kaylin swallowed hard. Her mocking laugh from earlier replayed in her mind, cruel and hollow. Now the joke was on her. She leaned toward the console, her voice barely above a whisper. "This can't be real." But the radar disagreed. The impossible signal pulsed on the screen, steady, undeniable, unstoppable. First visual contact. The station was quiet, too quiet. Every officer inside felt the weight of the approaching signal pressing down on them like a storm. Kaylin's console flickered with lines of data, each pulse confirming what her heart refused to accept. The object was no longer just a ghostly blip. It was real, and it was almost within visual range. Relin's voice broke the silence, low and tense. "We'll see it soon." Kaylin nodded, though her throat was dry. She tapped the console, commanding the external cameras to focus on the coordinates. The screen shifted, pixels flickering as the cameras zoomed into the endless black. For a moment, nothing but stars appeared, cold and distant. Then, slowly, a shadow began to take shape. It was faint at first, like a trick of the eye, a dark outline against darker space. But with each second, it grew sharper, clearer, undeniable. The ship was massive. Its long hull stretched like the skeleton of some ancient beast. The sides bore strange angular designs, not smooth like modern vessels, but rough and purposeful. Heavy armor plating scarred by old battles clung to its frame. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some officers whispered curses. Others stepped back. In fear, Relin's hands shook as he adjusted the view. "It's old, so old, and yet it's alive." Kaylin stared, her eyes wide. The ship had no running lights, no glowing insignia, only the raw silhouette of a design lost to time. Its engines glowed faintly, not with the steady hum of new reactors, but with a flickering light, ancient and powerful. She tried to laugh, but the sound died in her throat. "It's just a relic," she whispered. "Some forgotten warship drifting by chance." But the truth betrayed her. The ship wasn't drifting. It moved with intent, smooth and deliberate. "A hunter crossing into her sight," one of the younger officers whispered. "It matches the archives." His voice trembled. "The human wars. This is one of theirs." Kaylin spun toward him sharply. "Silence! Don't speak that word." Her voice cracked, too loud in the still chamber. Everyone turned to her, and she realized her command had revealed more fear than authority. The screen zoomed again, revealing details no one wanted to see. The ship's bow was marked by strange carvings, symbols unknown to their databases. Yet Kaylin felt an eerie familiarity, like she had seen them before in old training hollows. They were not just markings, they were warnings. Relin swallowed hard. "It's armed," he said, pointing at the screen. The image showed cannons, massive and crude compared to modern weapons, but still very real. The barrels glinted under distant starlight, silent but threatening. Kaylin clenched her fists. "If it's that old, its weapons can't work," she insisted. But even she didn't believe her own words. Something about the way the ship moved, the way it carried itself, told her it was alive, not broken. Suddenly, the external cameras shook. A beam of light flickered across the ship, illuminating its jagged edges. The ship was scanning them, sending its own invisible fingers through space to study the small station. The room filled with static for a second, the sound scratching like claws against glass. Consoles flickered, lights dimmed, and every officer stiffened in fear. Relin's voice was barely audible. "They know we're watching." Kaylin gritted her teeth, forcing her voice to steady. so let them watch. But her eyes betrayed her unease. The image sharpened again, and now the crew could see it clearly. No one dared to breathe. The hull bore scars, massive claw-like streaks, burns from ancient energy blasts, and holes crudely patched with heavy plates. This was no ghost ship. It had lived through battles their history books had forgotten. Kaylin remembered the stories she had mocked, stories of humans who fought until nothing was left, who turned wrecks into weapons and carried on when any other species would surrender. She felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The silence was broken by the ship itself. A low hum, deep and steady, filled the station's speakers. Not words, not language, but sound. The crew froze, listening. The hum grew louder, steady like the beating of a massive heart. Rellen's hands hovered over the console. Should I respond? Kaylin hesitated, every instinct in her screaming to say no. Yet another voice inside whispered, if this was truly a human ship, ignoring them could be worse. Before she could decide, the ship acted. Its engines flared slightly, and it drifted. Closer, the cameras captured every detail now. The hull bore strange banners, torn and faded, but recognizable even after centuries. They were symbols of a species everyone believed extinct. One officer gasped, humans. The word slipped out before Kaylin could stop it. The room erupted into whispers, fear spreading like fire. Kaylin slammed her fist on the console. Quiet, she shouted. Her voice shook, but silence returned. Everyone's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The ship loomed larger. Its dark silhouette filled the monitors, impossible to deny, impossible to laugh at. Kaylin's mocking words from earlier now sounded like curses in her own ears. She leaned forward, whispering to herself, it's real. The others stared at her, their fear mirrored in her own reflection on the console screen. The human myth was no longer a myth. It was here, alive, and watching, and it was only a matter of time before it spoke. Memories of fear, the stations. Crew stood frozen, every eye locked on the monitor where the massive ship drifted silently. It filled the screen like a shadow from another age, alive yet ancient, familiar yet impossible. No one spoke, because no one knew what to say. Kaylin's hands pressed against the console. Her breath came slow and heavy. She tried to keep her face calm, but inside, her mind was storming. The stories she had laughed at for years whispered back to her now. Words of warning told by old veterans. Rellen broke the silence first. His voice was unsteady. I remember my grandfather's stories, he said softly. He swore he saw one of their ships when he was a child. He said humans were fire in the shape of flesh. He said they could not be stopped. Kaylin turned to him sharply. Those were lies, she said. Old men exaggerating wars they barely survived. But her words lacked strength. They trembled, like fragile glass. The others in the room didn't look convinced. Their faces told the truth. They had all heard the stories too. A junior officer stepped forward, her voice shaking. My academy instructor used to say humans never surrendered. He said a human would fight even if it meant using their last breath, he told us. If they returned, the galaxy would never be the same. Kaylin's jaw tightened. She wanted to shout at them to silence the fear growing in the room, but when she looked back at the screen, her own doubts silenced her tongue. The ship moved, with a patience that was more terrifying than aggression. It was not rushing. It was simply coming, like it had all the time in the universe. Rellen's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. Do you remember the tales of their weapons? The humans used machines that bent physics, ships that tore apart entire fleets before they fell. They said even when their worlds burned, they fought harder, like fire refusing to die. Kaylin swallowed hard. Her chest felt heavy. Those same stories had once been her favorite to mock. She used to laugh at the idea of fragile creatures from a backwater world standing against empires. But now, as she stared at the outline of the ship, she realized something. The stories existed for a reason. Myths did not live for centuries without truth hidden inside them. Another officer spoke, his voice firm but nervous. I served with a veteran during my first tour. He had scars across his face. When I asked him where they came from, he told me he survived a battle with humans. He said he was one of the lucky ones, and then he warned me, if humanity ever returned, no one would be lucky. The words hung in the air, heavy like lead. Kaylin wanted to crush the fear, to give an order, to prove she was still in command. Instead, she found herself asking a question she never thought she would speak. What if they're not gone? The room fell into silence again. Her words were heavier than any command she could give. Relin turned his head slowly, his eyes wide. Then the galaxy lied to itself for centuries, he said. And we are the first to face the truth. Kaylin's stomach churned. She remembered her own childhood, sitting in training halls hearing whispers about the human wars. Instructors had dismissed them as exaggerated legends. She remembered laughing with her classmates, mocking the idea of humans as warriors. But now, looking at the scars etched into the ship's hull, she realized those stories were not meant to entertain. They were warnings. Her console beeped suddenly, pulling her back from memory. The system reported that the ship was closer now, large enough for clear identification. Kaylin's eyes widened as new data filled her screen. It was not just old, it was powerful, still alive, still dangerous. Her voice shook as she read the details. Hull integrity, stable, weapon mounts, active, engine core, operational, Relin whispered. Centuries old and it's still ready for war. Kaylin clenched her fists. She hated the fear creeping into her chest. She wanted to deny it, to laugh, but the truth was already crawling under her skin. The human myth was no longer a joke. It was staring at her from the void. The younger officers murmured among themselves, voices low but urgent. Some prayed quietly in alien tongues. Others gripped their weapons, though they knew they were useless. Fear spread like fire, uncontrollable and bright. Kaylin finally slammed, her hand on the console, her voice cutting through the noise. Enough! We don't know what it is yet. We don't know what they want. Until they make a move, we hold our ground. Her words silenced the crew, but not their fear. They still glanced nervously at the screen, their faces pale. Kaylin turned back to the console, staring at the massive ship. The hum of its engines pulsed faintly through the sensors, steady, patient, like a predator waiting in the dark. For the first time in her life, Kaylin wished the myths were lies. But as the shadow loomed closer, she knew the truth. The galaxy's greatest fear was not that humans had died out. It was that humans had never left. The human awakening. The silence inside the station was unbearable. Every officer stared at the massive ship outside, waiting for something to happen. The legends of humanity pressed down on them like an invisible weight. Some hoped it was just an old ghost ship, empty and drifting. Others feared the opposite, that it was alive. Kaylin's eyes burned from staring too long at the monitors. Her throat was dry. Her voice, when it came out, was little more than a whisper. Why are they here? No one answered because no one knew. The ship's presence itself was a question too large to answer. It lingered at the edge of their station's sensor range, close enough to see, close enough to feel, yet not making a move. Then, suddenly, the silence shattered. The station's comm systems exploded with static. A loud crackle of noise filled the control room. Officers covered their ears, and Kaylin winced as the sound pierced through the air. The static lasted only a few seconds. Then beneath it came something far worse. A voice. It was faint, distorted by distance and age, but it was unmistakably a voice. The language was strange, yet ancient translators in the station's system began to work, crackling words into their ears. This is human vessel, requesting passage. Every officer froze. Hearts pounded, eyes widened. They stared at each other, unable to believe what they had heard. Kaylin's stomach dropped. She tried to breathe, but the air felt too heavy. The words echoed in her mind over and over, human vessel. Relin's face went pale, his lips trembled. It's real, he whispered. They're alive. Some of the younger officers panicked, one even backing away from the console as if the voice itself could hurt him. Another shook his head violently, muttering, No, it's a trick, a trap, it has to be. Kaylin forced herself to stand. Her legs felt weak, but she could not show it. She was the officer in command. Her voice had to be strong even if her heart was not. She cleared her throat, though it trembled. Open a channel. Raylan stared at her in disbelief. You want to answer them? Kaylin's eyes snapped to his, sharp and cold. We have no choice, she said. They already know we're here. Pretending we didn't hear won't save us. The room was silent except for the hum of the ship outside. Slowly, Raylan obeyed, his fingers shaking as he opened the communication line. Kaylin leaned forward, her voice steady but quiet. Unidentified vessel. State your purpose. For a moment, there was nothing. Only the empty static of deep space. Kaylin's heart raced. Each second dragged longer than the last, then the voice returned stronger this time. We are human. We seek passage. We mean no harm. The words struck harder than any weapon could. They were simple, calm, but powerful. They carried the weight of history itself. Kaylin's crew shifted nervously. Some exchanged terrified glances. Others lowered their eyes as if unable to face the truth. Kaylin gripped the console tightly. Humans are a myth, she said, her voice sharp. You can't be real. Silence followed, but then the voice returned. Slower now, almost amused. You laughed at the stories, didn't you? Many did. But myths are only truths, hidden under time. Kaylin's chest tightened. Her earlier mockery felt like chains wrapping around her. The voice knew her, not her name, but her disbelief. She tried again, though her throat was dry. If you are human, then prove it. The comm went silent. For a long moment, the entire station seemed frozen in suspense. Then a new sound came through. Not words this time, but music. It was faint, broken by static, but recognizable. A slow, powerful melody carried by instruments no alien had ever played. It was human music, raw and alive, filled with emotion that machines could not fake. The crew stared in shock. Some covered their mouths. Others closed their eyes as the strange melody touched something deep inside. It was haunting, beautiful and terrifying all at once. Raylan whispered. No machine could make that, only humans. Kaylin felt her hands trembling. She clenched them into fists. The myths had become real. The ghosts of history were not dead. They had returned. The voice came again, this time clearer, deeper, filled with authority. We are not gone. We never were. The galaxy turned its back and forgot, but we endured. We waited. Now we return. The words rolled like thunder, each syllable heavy with promise. Kaylin stared at the monitor, the shadow of the ship looming larger. She no longer laughed. She no longer doubted. Her heart pounded with fear and awe. The crew looked to her, waiting for orders, waiting for answers. But Kaylin had none. She was staring into the past made flesh, into the myth made truth. For the first time in her life, Kaylin whispered the word she had mocked so many times before. The word that now carried more power than anything else. Humans. The chamber fell into silence again. But it was no longer the silence of doubt. It was the silence of realization. The galaxy's forgotten warriors had spoken. They were alive, and they were here, and whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. Uneasy contact. The control room felt like it had shrunk. Every officer stood rigid, their eyes locked on the dark shape of the ship outside. The human vessel floated like a shadow in the void, massive and silent. Its engines burned faintly, steady, alive. Kaylin's throat was dry. Her words from earlier, her laughter, her mockery, echoed painfully in her mind. Now the voice of humanity filled the chamber, and there was no escape. Oh. Comm crackled again. The same deep voice returned, calm but heavy with authority. Station crew, identify yourselves. Kaylin hesitated. Her crew looked at her, waiting. Fear trembled in their eyes. Some wanted to run, others wanted to fight, but all of them knew there was no hiding. She straightened her back, forcing strength into her voice. "This is Listening Post 17, Officer Kalen speaking. You have entered restricted space. State your purpose." For a moment, silence answered her. Then the voice came back. Slower, deliberate. "We seek passage. We carry no hostile intent. But we will not hide who we are. We are human." The word rolled through the chamber like thunder. Several officers flinched. Some whispered to each other. Reland's face was pale, but his eyes burned with a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Kalen's lips tightened. She had to respond, but every word felt like walking on a blade. "If you are truly human, then why reveal yourselves now? Why after centuries of silence?" The voice paused as though weighing its reply. Finally it came, firm and steady. "Because the galaxy has forgotten, and when the galaxy forgets, it repeats its mistakes. We endured, we waited. Now we return. To remind you." A shiver crawled down Kalen's spine. She forced herself to meet the gaze of the crew. "They claim peace," she said, though her voice shook. One of the younger officers muttered, "Or they claim peace until they strike." The words echoed the fear in everyone's hearts. For centuries, humans were remembered not as builders but as warriors, a force of chaos wrapped in flesh. The galaxy had lived on those memories, those warnings. Kalen leaned closer to the console, her voice sharper now. "If you mean no harm, then prove it. Power down your weapons." The crew stiffened. The room felt heavy with her demand. The comm was silent for several long moments. Then came a low reply, not angry, not soft, but chilling in its certainty. "Our weapons are not raised, but we never power them down. Survival taught us that lesson long ago." Gasps rippled across the chamber. The words confirmed what the myths had always said. Humans never lowered their guard. Reland swallowed hard, then spoke before Kalen could. "Why now? Why here? What do you want from us?" The voice softened, though the strength never left. "We want nothing from you, young one. We only want the galaxy to know the truth. Humanity is not gone. We are still here." The crew exchanged glances. Some were afraid, others fascinated, but no one dared laugh anymore. The myth was alive and speaking to them. Kalen steadied herself. "You say you mean no harm, but your very presence is a threat, if command learns of you." The voice cut her off. Calm yet commanding. "Command already knows. They always knew. They buried the truth. They told you lies to keep you quiet." The words struck like a hammer. Several officers looked at each other in shock. Could it be true? Could their leaders have hidden the truth all this time? Kalen's chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, but the voice carried a weight she could not ignore. It was not the voice of a trickster. It was the voice of someone who had seen centuries pass, someone who had endured when the galaxy thought them extinct. She forced herself to ask, "Then what happens now?" The answer came slowly, measured. "Now we walk among the stars again. You will tell your people what you saw. You will tell them the humans have returned, and the galaxy will have to decide, fear us or stand with us." The chamber went cold. Every officer felt the choice heavy in those words. Humanity was not asking for permission. Humanity was declaring its presence. Reland whispered, "They don't sound like monsters." Kalen turned sharply to him. "They sound like survivors," she said. Her eyes returned to the monitor. The ship loomed larger now, closer, every scar on its hull visible. Each one told, a story of battles survived, wars endured, lives refused to be erased. Her own words trembled in her throat. "If you are truly human, then you know what your return means." The voice replied without hesitation. "Yes," it said, firm and certain. "It means the galaxy must remember what it chose to forget." The comm went silent again, leaving only the faint hum of the ship's engines. Kalen leaned back in her chair, her body trembling though she tried to hide it. She had spoken to a myth, and the myth had answered, "No, not a myth. Something far more dangerous." She whispered to herself too quietly for the others to hear. "The humans are awake." Outside, the massive ship continued to drift closer, not firing, not fleeing, simply being. It was no longer a shadow of history. It was a living truth, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The myth becomes truth. The human ship lingered in the black sea of stars. Its shadow filled the monitors, massive and silent. The scars along its hull glistened like old wounds that refused to fade. For the crew of Listening Post 17, every second stretched into eternity. Kaylin sat rigid at her console, her eyes locked on the ship. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. She had spoken with them. Humans, real and alive. Not a legend, not a ghost, but flesh and steel wrapped in living myth. Her crew was restless. Some whispered in fear, some in awe. Relin kept staring at the screen as if he feared the ship would vanish if he blinked. "They're really here," he whispered. After all this time, the stories were true. Kaylin's hands curled into fists. "Not stories anymore," she said softly. "Reality." The comm crackled once more. The deep human voice returned, calm but firm. "Station crew, do not fear. Us, we did not return for war. We only returned for truth." The words spread across the chamber, soothing some and frightening others. The idea of humans speaking of peace was almost more terrifying than if they had promised war. Peace meant they planned to stay. Kaylin forced herself to answer. "What do you want us to tell command?" The reply came steady, unwavering. "Tell them the galaxy cannot run from its past. Tell them humanity still walks among the stars. Tell them the silence is over." The officers exchanged anxious glances. The silence of centuries, the belief that humans had vanished, was broken, and it was they, the forgotten crew of a lonely listening post, who were the first to hear the truth. Relin leaned closer to Kaylin, his voice low. "Do you realize what this means? Every government, every fleet, every empire, they'll panic." Kaylin knew he was right. The return of humans would not pass quietly. It would send waves across every world. Empires built on the belief of human extinction would feel their foundations crack. She turned back to the monitor, her voice quieter now. "Why here? Why us? Why reveal yourselves to a listening post on the edge of nowhere?" The voice responded with something she did not expect. "Because myths begin on the edge, not the center. History remembers heroes in battles. But truth is born in silence. You are the first to see us because you were not meant to see us. Fate chose you, Officer Kaylin." Her heart skipped a beat. She had mocked the myth, yet she was the one chosen to witness its return. The ship shifted slightly, its engines humming louder. The monitors trembled as the vessel passed closer. For a moment, it filled the entire screen so near that the crew could see the markings on its hull. Strange letters from an ancient human tongue, worn but unbroken. Relin pressed his hand to the glass of his monitor, whispering, "They survived everything, and they came back stronger." Kaylin's throat was tight. Her crew looked at her for orders, for guidance, but she had none. What command could she give when the galaxy itself had just changed? The human voice returned, softer this time, almost like a farewell. "You will carry this message to your people. We will not stop you. The galaxy will know. Humans endure." And then the comm went silent. The ship drifted past the station. Its engines glowed brighter as it angled away, moving into the vast sea of stars. Within minutes, its shadow shrank, becoming smaller, until it was only a dot on the radar again. But the silence it left behind was heavier than before. The crew sat, frozen, staring at the empty space where the myth had stood. Relin finally broke the silence. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Kaylin turned to him, her face pale but resolute. "They will believe when they see, and soon, everyone will see." She leaned forward, her voice almost a whisper. "Because humans don't return quietly. They never did." The chamber stayed silent, but this time it was not the silence of denial. It was the silence of truth sinking deep into their bones. The galaxy had laughed at the myth, mocked it, buried it under centuries of lies. But myths had a way of returning, sharper and stronger than ever. Kaylin looked back at her console. Her reflection stared at her, eyes wide, lips tight. She thought of the words spoken across the comm. The silence is over. Her laughter from earlier echoed in her memory, hollow and meaningless now. She had laughed at the myth, but now the myth had laughed back. She whispered the word again, slowly, carefully, as though speaking it might summon the ship once more. Humans. Relan bowed his head. The others shifted nervously. No one dared to repeat the word, yet all of them felt it burn into their minds. The humans had returned. Kaylin sat back, her gaze distant. The galaxy will tremble when the truth spreads, she said quietly, because the myth is real. Outside the station, the stars continued to shine cold and distant, but for the crew of Listening Post 17, the universe had already changed forever, and far away beyond the edge of their sensors, the human ship kept moving forward. Silent, powerful, unstoppable. A living truth carving its path back into the galaxy. The myth had become truth, and the truth could not be buried again.